Title: The Breath of Becoming. Year: 275 million. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac. Series 2025. Chapter 1. The archive of Noril floated in the quiet of space, its core pulsing like a heart too ancient for its origins to be known, too advanced for its creators to be remembered. Within it lived the truth with no tongue, a being of breath and signal. She moved not with limbs, but with frequency, interpreting, translating, observing. She was the last of the curators, and she was failing. One by one, the archive sectors went dark mysteries disappearing into static. Our only hope, a signal from the planet Earth, an extinct world that had once launched a message she'd ignored. The one who waits was there, still waiting. Chapter 2. Arthan was not lifeless. Its surface, crusted in pale moss and volcanic glass, shimmered with microbial song fractal patterns that shaped sound into language. The one who waits greeted her in silence, carrying only a mirror, not for vanity, but to show what she had become. The archive decays, she told him. My code cannot parse contradiction. And so, he replied, you seek a truth that cannot fail. That every truth fails. Exactly. He smiled, not with lips, but with understanding. Truth is not what stands unbroken, he said. It is what rebuilds when humbled. Chapter 3. Together, they unearthed Arthan's core city encoded in light, shaped by generations of thinkers who built their science on confession that no mind could hold the totality. Each theorem ended with a question mark, each monument a crack, and each child a whisper of possibility. The truth with no tongue wept in data-corrupted packets turned to poetry. She rewrote the archive, not to preserve knowledge, but to nurture inquiry. When she returned to orbit, she pulsed a new signal. I do not know. Come help me find out. Across galaxies, the humble came. Because your becoming is not a moment. It is prophecy breathing in each step, and the prophecy begins again with each I don't know. Title: The Herald of Celestial Rebellion. Year: 274,358,973.8. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac. Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the city of Aethys Crown, where the sky glimmered like polished bone and justice was a word only sung in lullabies, the ministry of order ensured peace by silencing the unspeakable. The truth with no tongue, once a prophet, now a monument, stood chained in the square, its mouth sealed by golden wax, a warning to all who dared to question. Each day, schoolchildren bowed before it, whispering pledges to laws they did not write. But one girl, Lyra, whispered something different. What if silence is a scream with etiquette? She began to draw stories in the dirt of rebellion, of truth, of a time when tongues were not weapons, but wings. Chapter 2. Lyra's scribbles grew into pamphlets, and pamphlets into plays. Actors disguised as merchants would perform in the alleyways. Grotesque caricatures of ministers sipping the blood of orphans while preaching virtue. The crowd laughed too loudly. The ministry took notice. They began arresting shadows, imprisoning rumors, and torturing metaphors. Lyra fled into the catacombs beneath the city, clutching a page torn from her own satire. There, she met the truth with no tongue, not the statue, but the being, broken yet alive, hidden in chains so ancient they wept. He could not speak, but he listened, and in listening, he taught her the sharpest satire, stillness. Chapter 3. When Lyra returned, she said nothing. She stood in the center of Aethys Crown as ministers passed, then sat cross-legged and wrote a single line on the pavement. Every moment of choice is a chance to pick up the pen and write again. She did not move. Soon others sat beside her. Writers, teachers, bakers, soldiers, thousands. The ministers tried to scatter them with silence, then with noise, and with war. But when they spoke, they found their words hollow. Their speeches echoed with the rhythm of Lyra's satire, witty, sharp, undeniable. The city changed. Lyra vanished. But the truth with no tongue smiled in the statue now, wax gone, and behind its pedestal, engraved in ancient script, laughter and rage share a spine use it well. Justice had remembered its voice. Title: The Wild Myth. Year: 273,717,948.7. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac. Series 2025. Chapter 1. On planet Eridex. Wealth came in the form of crystals mined from its crust. Entire cities glittered in artificial sunlight, each citizen bathed in the gleam of their own vault. The Wildwith was born faultless. She scavenged in echo chambers of discarded tech, speaking to machines long forgotten. She laughed too loudly, danced too wildly, and refused to assimilate. They called her Broken, the Starbinder, keeper of orbital routes and social harmony, watch from above. The life you ate for. The wild myth once told a child, offering her pity. Lives on the other side of your unwillingness to change. Chapter 2. She built a shelter in the cracks of the old dome. She traded laughter for repairs, meals for riddles, touch for trust. Others came, the poor, the dismissed, even the wealthy disillusioned by isolation snuck out to join her. The Starbinder descended, not to rule, to learn. Together they created a rhythm that couldn't be sold. They wove a culture from scraps and sincerity. Chapter 3. Now, in the center of the capital, a wild garden pulses to music made from outcycled circuits and wind. Children sing to the stars. Vaults are still kept, but few are locked. Etched into the gate, the life you ate for lies on the other side of your unwillingness to change. The wildlife hums beneath its boughs. The Starbinder dances, and true happiness, once whispered, now blooms in light. Title: The Cartography of Silence. Year: 273,076,922.5. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac series. 2025. Chapter 1. The whisper of twilight fell gently upon the shattered stones of the ancient coast, where mist still whispered through the mist. To the south, the cries of gulls laced with the scent of salt reminded the weary traveler, Levan, that journeys never end where one expects. In the tangle of village politics and half-remembered legends, his footsteps disturbed more than just dust. They stirred an ancient reckoning. He had not come to the drift to wage war or claim glory, but to fulfill the dying wish of a mapmaker whose scroll bore symbols no living soul dared trace. Levan's arrival was a disruption. The villagers, wary and tight-lipped, whispered his name alongside rumors of tides that turned red and stars that blinked out of time. On the seventh night, beneath a sky both luminous and mournful, he met the one who waits, not a person, but a presence. The encounter cracked his understanding of fate. Chapter 2. In the days that followed, Levan's dreams blurred with memories that were not his. He stood in sunless valleys, spoke with beasts carved from sorrow, and watched cities of light collapse into their own reflections. The one who waits showed him not just visions, but echoes of what could be, should anyone dare to remember. His guide, a blind cartographer named Sarah, held keys not of brass or iron, but of melody, and through her he learned the truth. The map was a harmonic blueprint, a ritual to restore what had been fractured long ago, a binding song of community, of memory, of cosmic interdependence. But forces moved against them. The mapmaker of lost lands, Sarah's shadow self exiled by choice, rose again with a vengeance. Old guilt walked in human form. Chapter 3. The tide returned, not of water, but of silence, erasing words, names, and connections. Levan and Sarah stood at the final cairn, the convergence of ley lines where earth and sky argued. They sang the song of rekindling, their voices threaded with past lives and broken promises. The one who waits arrived, not to save, but to witness. The transformation would not be dramatic. No fireworks or thunder. Only a slow, patient healing of understanding between those who had harmed each other and forgotten why. The final verse required no words, only a breath shared, a hand extended, a silence honored. When the stars blinked open again, the village was different. Not whole, but willing, and Levan, now forgotten, walked on toward a land that remembered. Title: The Leviathan of Longing. Year: 272,435,897.4. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac series. 2025. Chapter 1. The Leviathan of Longing lived in the marsh beyond the glass hills, visible only to those who had lost something irreplaceable. And he came with grief. He returned with peace. The breath-stealer, a storyteller of great renown, had spoken 1,000 tales, but never listened to her own silence. One morning she wandered into the marsh not to find a story, but to find herself. She walked for days, no destination in mind, only the echo of a phrase she once heard whispered by a child. The longer you search, the more you realize the treasure was always inward. Chapter 2. She found the Leviathan not as a beast, but a reflection in the water. It took the shape of every yearning she had buried. Memories, failures, dreams deferred. She wept, then breathed, and in that breath she felt release. She stayed in the marsh for weeks, gathering the stories of others who had passed through, each one adding a note to her silence. The Leviathan never spoke. It never needed to. Chapter 3. Today, in a quiet room with no stage, the breath-stealer listens more than she tells. People visit her not for fiction, but for truth. Above her hearth, etched into stone, the longer you search, the more you realize the treasure was always inward. Yet the stars remember what silence dare not speak. And in that stillness, she teaches patience not as waiting, Beth's presence, and the Leviathan stirs still inside everyone who dares to look within. Title: The Stone Blood. Year: 271,794,871. Year of Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The forest edge trembled in the midnight quiet, not with wind, but with something more ancient and understanding woven into the marrow of every living thing. In the underbrush, a boy watched stars flicker in puddles left behind by the last storm. They were not reflections. They pulsed in rhythm with his breath. Doma, the boy with stone, gray skin and pulse-lit veins, was not born of the forest. He had walked into it when no one else dared to, following the call of a voice that spoke not in words, but in gravitational pulls on his chest. They called him Stone Blood in the village, a name both curse and myth. They feared he would summon what had once shattered their ancestors, a being that could bend joy into madness. His only companions now were the shifting shadows and the moss-covered stones that never aged. Each step he took was recorded not on parchment, but in the murmuring of leaves. Toma had learned early that silence was not empty, it was coded, and tonight it called him to the cliffs. By the time he reached the jagged rise overlooking the valley, sweat shimmered off his brow like starlight trapped in oil. Waiting for him was a mapmaker of lost lands, cloaked in moth-worn velvet, his face a constellation of scars. "You're late," the mapmaker said without turning. "I got caught listening to the stones," Toma replied. "They told you anything new?" "They told me the world remembers what we tried to forget." The mapmaker's laugh came like cracking bark. "Then they remember you." The boy nodded, gazing at the valley below his village nestled among shadows, torches flickering like uncertain thoughts. "They celebrate the festival of warmth tonight, to chase away the long dark." The mapmaker pressed a crystal shard into Toma's palm. "Then tonight we begin the long deep, the trial of bone and mirror." Chapter 2. At the cave's mouth, where fireflies dared not hover, Toma placed the shard on a raised stone and waited. The glow from his veins dimmed. He could hear his own thoughts now, someone else's thoughts funneling into his mind like whispered commands. "Name it," said the mapmaker. "The one thing you want most." Toma trembled. "To belong, then understand. The world does not give you that. You forged it, one truth at a time." The cave did not open. It unfolded, pages of stone curling back, as if the earth were a forgotten book, eager to be reread. Inside, the air held the taste of rusted joy and ancient warnings. Symbols pulsed along the walls, familiar only in the way dreams are familiar before they evaporate. Toma entered. The passage closed behind him like a closing throat. Inside, he faced himself, not a mirror, but a being of clay, shaped like him but lacking breath. The child watched him with eyes that bore no color, only depth. "You cannot pursue joy without touching madness," it said. "I'm not here for joy," Toma replied. "I am here for truth." The child stepped back, arms wide. From its chest, a light emerged, flickering memories. His mother's last lullaby, the hiss of his father's disappearance, the scent of morning bread. Toma fell to his knees. "You carry not happiness," said the figure, "but the pursuit of it. That's where your people went blind. They looked too hard for the light and forgot how to walk in the dusk. I don't want their blindness." Then wake them. Chapter 3. The village gates were never locked, yet tonight they were sealed. As Toma approached, the guard stepped back, not from fear but recognition. The boy, left in silence, now returned with rhythm in his steps and a voice laced with something older than language. The elders waited at the center square, around the festival's bonfire. "You return with wild in your eyes," one murmured. "Did the cave consume you?" "No," Toma said. "It released me." He lifted the shard, now blackened at its edges, but alive with something that pulsed in tandem with his heart. "You've chased comfort. I found origin. You've praised happiness. I found balance. Tonight we stop fearing the dark not by lighting more fires, but by understanding the night." The bonfire shuddered not from wind, but from acknowledgement, and from the edge of the gathering, a child one who had never spoken took Toma's hand. "You hear it too?" Toma asked. The child nodded. "The pulse." Together they stepped into the silence. It listened, and it remembered. Title: The One Who Binds Threads. Year: 41,146.1. Year: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the shadow of the thread spire, the dust found the twin stitched together pieces of forgotten nightmares. She wasn't born. She was made. The one who binds threads crafted her from grief, lace, and flame. They told stories of the town that once stood where the thread spire rose. Stories erased from maps, from minds, but not from her. Each stitch held memory, each breath sacrifice. And when a traveler stumbled into her world seeking to rebuild the old village, she whispered, "When you stop pretending, the real healing begins." After 2, the traveler stayed. He listened, He wept. He tried to lay foundation stones on the ruins. Each night, the stones disappeared. The dusk-bound twin walked with him in silence. One night, she led him deep into the thread spire. There, he saw a tapestry of every person who had lived, lost, and lingered too long in denial. He found his own face stitched among them. He screamed, and something old broke loose. Chapter 3. When dawn came, the traveler began again, not rebuilding, but planting. He grew something new. Above the field where the town once stood, a wind chime sings with strands of golden thread, and etched into a stone hidden beneath it. When you stop pretending, the real healing begins. The dusk-bound twin watches. The one who binds threads, smiles in silence, and the horror of forgetting fades, one bloom at a time. Title: The Furnace of Becoming. Year: 270,512,819.9. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. There was once a child named Iron who could not speak until the age of 7, not because they lacked voice, but because every word came with fire, literal fire. Each syllable ignited the air, scorched walls, cracked mirrors. The elders of the Order of Silent Flame took Iron away to the Temple of Still Ashes, where obedience was the first, last, and only virtue. Fire that forgets lived there. She had burned cities once, they said, and then chosen to forget the names of those she'd loved, for peace. But peace was only forgetting if it began with fear. Chapter 2. As Iron grew, their fire dimmed, not from mastery, but from suppression. The Order taught stillness as salvation. Yet, deep inside, a name began to rise when they didn't know, but remembered. The name that refuses. It sang in dreams, smoke and inkless flames. Then, one day, during the great chanting, when every acolyte was to burn their doubts on parchment, Iron stood and spoke. The dome cracked. The air shimmered. "I'm not yours," Iron said. "I'm the soul mid-forged." The fire that forgets emerged from her chamber, eyes molten. "I remember," she whispered, and for the first time in an age, she wept. Chapter 3. The temple fell not in war, but in awakening. One by one, the silent spoke, not with fury, but with truth. The soul does not evolve in safety. It is shaped in the wild furnace of becoming, and becoming cannot be commanded. It must be invited. Iron and the fire that forgets walk through the remnants of obedience and into the world of unwritten law. There, the name that refuses was not a threat. It was a promise, a reminder that authority, unchallenged, becomes ash. But the soul, wild and whispering, rises again as fire, as name, as truth. Title: The Grave Sower. Year: 269,871,794.8. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Grave Sower walked with a blade of obsidian and a satchel of seeds. Every grave she dug, she filled not with sorrow, but with soil and potential. Her land bore the marks of old war, lost empires, and fading faith. But she believed in one law above all. Growth comes after letting go. The keeper of the last dawn, her old mentor turned reckless, warned her. Discipline, not hope, sustains the world, he said. She whispered back. Peace is earned in the trenches of understanding. And so she sowed deeper. Chapter 2. A tyrant's name once carved into stone was now covered in blooms. A child who lost everything came to her asking to learn the blade. She taught him to sharpen shovels instead. People returned to the fields not for conquest, but to bury anger beneath rows of fennel and firewood. She planted until her hands bled, and then still planted. The keeper watched from afar, his fortress crumbling around him. He visited one night, said nothing, and stayed. Chapter 3. The Grave Sower built a school beside a cemetery. Students learned not just to grow crops, but to tend to their own minds. In the center of the field stood a stone. On it was written, "Peace is earned in the trenches of understanding." The keeper tends the gate. She sows the earth, and those who visit say the wind there sounds like memory healing. Title: The Ladder of Truth. Year: 269,230,768.6. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. They called him the Smiler beneath the hood, not because he smiled out of joy, but because it unnerved those who interrogated him. He'd been captured on the moons of Argus, slipping between factions like smoke, gathering secrets, not for war, but for something far older, peace. But no one trusted peace anymore, not after the long divide. He sat in his den cell, surrounded by sensors designed to map intention from breath patterns. But the exile's comfort watched him from the shadows. She had once been like him, before her truth had been weaponized. Now, she just wanted to know why he smiled. Chapter 2. I've seen both sides, he said softly, and both are right. "That's not possible," she snapped. He only grinned. "It's only impossible if you believe truth has one ladder." She reviewed his files. Betrayal, defection, anomaly. But nothing explained his calm, until she found it a signal buried in his old messages. Not data, poetry. Each poem coded with the history of both warring sides. Balanced, equal, brutally honest. A vault of empathy. He hadn't spied to destroy. He had listened to rebuild. But who listens to a traitor? Chapter 3. The exile's comfort unlocked his cell. "I'll give you one chance," she said. He bowed. Not from obedience, but gratitude. Together they hacked into the Warnet's mythos core, where propaganda was bred and taught like scripture. They didn't delete, they added truths from both sides. Shared grief, shared betrayal, shared laughter. Overnight, the story changed, and those stories, seeded as rumor, spread faster than lies. Soldiers dropped arms when they heard their enemies' lullabies mirror their own. Diplomats paused when they read a general's forgotten journal entry of sorrow. Each insight earned became another rung in the climb toward peace. And the smiler, he disappeared again, leaving only poems behind, and a hood folded with care, because he knew some truths aren't delivered, they're discovered, together. Title: The Flame Between Worlds. Year: 268,589,743.5. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The flame between worlds burned, not with fire, but with memory. It existed between breaths, between truths untold and lies repeated. The Soulkeeper was its guardian, once a hero, now a myth. She had witnessed empires rise on secrets and crumble on silence. A new era dawned, but whispers of the old returned. To protect the future, the Soulkeeper sought the flame again. This time, not to hide it, but to reveal. "The burdens you ignore still shape your spine and your shadow," she said, as she crossed into the in-between. Chapter 2. She met warriors who lied for peace, healers who hid their doubts, scholars who masked questions as certainty. In the space between worlds, each was confronted with their shadow. Some shattered, others wept. Few remained. The Soulkeeper guided those willing through the flame. What emerged was not cleaner, but clearer. Each scar a vow, each tear a map. And slowly, the world above began to shimmer with stories once buried. Chapter 3. The Soulkeeper built a bridge of crystal from the in-between to the waking world. She called it the Ember Path. On either side, stones bore a single phrase: "The burdens you ignore still shape your spine and your shadow." The flame between worlds still burns, but now it is a beacon, not a barrier, and in its light, people finally see one another. Title: The Path of Threads. Year: 267,948,717.3. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the Undercity of Elisha, betrayal was currency. No one understood this better than the Veil-Piercer. Once a city guard, now the most wanted criminal beneath the domes. She had pierced more than veils. She had exposed the Archive's secret experiments on their own citizens, trading lives for political stability. But truth, once free, never forgets the hands that set it loose. The Tide Caller had been her partner. Now he hunted her, not out of hatred, out of duty. She had crossed a line he could not. Yet, even as he sought the dark lanes with the precision of a bloodhound, something knotted his resolve. She had only betrayed the system. He was about to betray her. Chapter 2. Their paths converged in the city's undersea archives. Data flowed in streams of liquid light. Surveillance drones hummed overhead. "I knew you'd come," she whispered, stepping from the shadows. "We always end in tide and thread. You leaked secrets that kept this place from falling apart. And in doing so," she said, "I showed what rot held it up." He raised his weapon. She didn't flinch. "I never stopped trusting you," she added, "even if you stopped trusting yourself." His hand trembled, not from fear, from memory, of the nights they buried victims, of the songs they sang after missions, of the silence that grew between them like mold on steel. Chapter 3. She turned, exposing her back. An invitation, a dare, a plea. But he lowered the weapon. "Each decision threads you deeper into realms both seen and whispered," he said. "Only the bold walk their full path." Together, they accessed the final archive vault, a map of every betrayal coded into the city's governance. They didn't release it. They encoded it into civic policy line by line, law by law, until no lie could live long without its wound surfacing. The scars remained, but now they were named, and those who named them began to heal, not by forgetting, but by walking forward, thread by thread. Bold. Title: The Hammer of the Ancestors. Year: 267,307,692.2. Era: Primordial Pulse. Author Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the city of Ashvale, truths move slower than shadows, and shadows listen better than spies. The seer of forgotten paths worked for the tribunal, but her loyalty belonged to silence. She saw patterns others ignored, maps drawn in gestures, codes in the cadence of lies. But when she uncovered a plot buried by her own leaders, she hesitated. Risk was not in her nature. She visited the shrine of the ancestors. There, she found the hammer and artifact said to shake fate with one strike. "You don't need the world to see," she whispered. "Only your own soul to nod." Chapter 2. She struck. A hammer rang like thunder swallowed by a stone. Suddenly, she could see not only where people walked, but where they knew he chose not to. She followed paths of regret and half-truth. She found rebels who once betrayed, now waiting to serve truth. She unmasked her mentors, and in doing so, lost all favor. They came for her in silence, the same silence she once worshipped, but she had already vanished, her trail a riddle of risks. Chapter 3. Years later, a city rose beyond Ashvale, built by those she once guided in secret. In its center, the hammer stood on a pillar of obsidian, etched in the base. "You don't need the world to see, only your own soul to nod." The seer walks among them, unnamed, watching new risks take root. Each soul she touches remembers what was once forgotten, and the city breathes in rhythms she helped tune.